Hello.
I did it. Those baby celebrations.
Celebrate the little things when they're big, right?
Liv.
And I did find the person. She's Brooke Lively. I can't believe I forgot that name.
So funny. That would be lovely.
Yes. All right. So I'm in Atlanta this week. We'll leave here probably next Tuesday or Wednesday.
Right.
They're forecasting 30 to 36 inches of snow in Cheyenne this weekend. I'm like, maybe I'm not coming back just yet. 75 here today, just saying.
Just saying. Wow.
Right. Crazy.
So is your honey with you?
He is, yes.
Oh, lovely. Lovely.
Yes,
And did you drive or fly?
We drove.
Got it.
So much easier these days. And plus I got to bring my dog.
There you go. And are you packing things up to take back?
Mostly, although I decided at the very last moment not to sell my condo. So I'm now in the process of figuring out what this is going to look like. And you would laugh if you walk in, you'd see a sofa, a chair, and not much else. So, all right, it's 1 o'clock.
It's 1 o'clock. Julie, you want to introduce us in, or you want me to today?
It would be my delight to do it. Welcome, everyone. I'm Julie Fleming. I'm delighted to be here with my friend and colleague, Ivy Slater, as we talk with you today about innovation, trepidation, and adaptation. There's so many new things that are coming at us all the time. And we thought it would be good to talk about, how do you decide what to start? How do you decide how to start? How do you know what's working and what isn't? And how do you know when it's time to commit? So that's our topic. And Ivy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us here today, whether you're listening live or listening on a recording. Please feel free always to reach out to us. Put some notes in the chat, put some questions in the chat. And if you're listening on a recording, always feel free to reach out with any questions or comments. I am Ivy Slater. I'm the owner of a company called Slater Success. It's a coaching and consulting company. We work with an enormous amount of the professional service industry, including law firms, attorneys, CPAs, CFO and bookkeeping companies, as well as a variety of others. We truly help companies scale and grow from looking at a high-level leadership perspective and looking at, what do you want to achieve and how are you going to do that? That's the simple approach there. I was really excited, I have to tell you, to talk about this topic today, Julie, because it is just, it's so relevant right now.
Yes, more than ever. And actually, Ivy, we didn't prepare this, but this webinar series that we're doing, I don't know about the trepidation part, but I think this is a great example of jumping into something that's new. We've never worked together in any way. We've been friends and colleagues for a long time, but deciding to jump in and put on this webinar series. And I guess we started maybe in September. So in the depths of this extraordinary time. And here we still are in March going forward.
And, if we weren't willing to just jump in and play, try new things, and that's that innovation piece. If you've been listening to a variety of these webinars in the series, you will know that we have talked very much about being current, being relevant, right? What could we do now? What could we do in networking in a virtual world? this brought on by Julie and I literally kind of having cocktails with a bunch of our other friends and colleagues, and then having, just that catch-up conversation, said, what would it look like if we played together? And there's that spark of innovation. And there was not a lot of trepidation for us because we said, where's the downside? And I think that's always relevant. It's like, where's the upside? Where's the downside? Mm-hmm. And then adaptation is like, okay, 60 minutes on the calendar, let's see. And one led to the next and the next. And these webinars have continued to adapt based on being present and showing up 100% for the innovative perspective.
Exactly. And when I think of innovation, I tend to think in images. And so the image that I think of is a trapeze. And sometimes you're far above the ground, sometimes you're not so far, but there's always motion to it. I think that it's possible for me, in times in the past with my business, when I've started thinking about doing something new, I'm an attorney by background, though no longer practicing. I want to nail everything down, get it just so, and then roll it out in just the right way. And that's just not how innovation works. With innovation, yes, we need to have some sense of what to do, but we don't have to nail it down. And in fact, to my mind, if we do get it truly nailed down, one of two things will happen. Either we won't ever start because it's not ready yet, or number two, we will squeeze the life and the motion and the vibrance and vitality out of whatever it is, because things are in this tiny little box. And again, that's just not how innovation works. Ivy, you have such a great story. Would you be willing to tell us about you and LinkedIn Live?
Absolutely. So, with this extraordinary time with, doing business during a global pandemic, and I'm going to say I've had a few times in my life that I had some very unexpected times as a business owner in the last 20 some odd years. I saw last year, like, ooh, this LinkedIn Live, people are starting to do lives on LinkedIn, and everybody's like, oh, Ivy, you should do more Facebook Lives. I'm like, just wasn't really sitting there. I've done a few over the years, still do a few, but it doesn't excite me. All of a sudden, I saw some people doing it, and I got really excited. I was like, oh, I want to do that. And then it's like, okay, how do I do that?
And I want to pause you really quickly, because I think what you just said is such an important thing. I got excited. There's some things that really draw us forward. It's not 100%. We're going to talk perhaps today, perhaps certainly actually next month, about getting some data for making decisions. But we do a lot from gut. Data really matters. Data is critical. When it comes to innovation, I think the gut is such a good guide, because if I'm not excited, why?
And when it comes to innovation, we don't always have the data yet.
Right. No one may have the data.
Nobody, right? So if we look at this, so I did it, this much, how do I figure this out? And I sent in an application. And then crickets for 1 month, 2 months, we're on 3 months. I was like, well, I decided I want to do this. So I was like, how do I, and LinkedIn was like, once you send in an application, don't reach out to us again. Like, you can't follow up. It's a no follow-up policy. I'm like, okay, what else can we do? So I reached out to some people I know within my network, and Julie and I have done a few different webinars in the last 6+ months or so on the importance of your network. With that, I reached out and I said, hey, for the people who I know who do LinkedIn trainings. And they said, oh, why don't you resubmit, change some things up? Sometimes maybe it just fell through the cracks. Maybe they got it inundated and you didn't make that cut. Bring it back to the top of the pile. It's like, oh, as a business owner, that makes perfect sense to me. I re-looked at it, refreshed it, now having to pop on other people's LinkedIn and getting some information, or what I assumed was enough information to make me dangerous, but enough information for me to make decisions and put together a quick little idea. Resubmitted. Within a matter of weeks, we got the go-ahead. So then my team said, great, when do we start? I was like, well, now we need a brand. We want to brand a show. We want to create a show. We want to brand a show. We want to see where this is fitting in with the Slater success strategy of growth, and now do all the positioning. I was like, right? So now we took 60 days, started doing that back end, right? We set a plan. Because again, and we're working on this much information, but we set that plan in action. And we said, great, we're going to start in December because it's going to be a low viewership month, we assume. And again, you never assume because we know that. And we did it anyway. We said, because that way we can get the kinks out. I needed to learn a new technology. It's a whole different platform than using Zoom or Teams. You have to use a different tech platform. I'm a little slow on learning new tech. I own that. So I said, and so then I invited people in to be my first guest that I knew like not just good interviews, but I knew they were more tech smart than me. My first guest was this really, really savvy tech smart woman who interviews beautifully. So I created stacking assets.
Oh, I love that phrase, stacking assets. Yes.
And, now we're in month 4 and we're adding more shows because what we're seeing is we're talking to great people around great conversations in great industry. Now, so for instance, I had a guest on who's a CEO of a major IT company and cybersecurity, right? Big in professional service space. What do my people might want to know about? I had a guest on who's at a very high level of leadership in ESPN, Disney, and we discussed on the importance of women mentorships and what that looks like. I work with a lot of women leaders. So I'm not selling to our guests, right? I'm not presenting my stuff. I am creating interviews to help them gain insight that would be assets to them. Again, stacking those assets. What I'm seeing as a result, right? So innovation, trepidation was really big with the tech side, let me tell you. Okay, I was shaking to the point of the second show. I forgot to hit the go live button after I started, and I had to read it. There was trepidation there. Can I do this new platform? What will it look like? And adaptation is learning and doing, and what the results we're seeing is an enormous amount of other professional service people reaching out to me on LinkedIn and wanting to connect. Check. We're moving the needle forward in biz dev. We're moving the needle forward in scaling.
I love that. And one other part of that I want to ask you about, Ivy. When you decided to do this, when you had that, ooh, that sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Let's figure out how to make this happen. How did you put it initially in the context of the plans for your business? And how did you plan to measure success?
So I looked at it as in my business planning efforts. Okay, we know, and on our social media efforts. So I look at, in my business development, I look at my forefront and my support system. Okay, so my forefront is my greatest ways to biz dev is do reach out calls to my network, have those conversations, do additional networking and speaking. That's my forefront of biz dev. My support systems in biz dev is my social media, right? My marketing component there. So it will be the newsletters, the podcasts. LinkedIn is what my strongest, if I look at LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn is my strongest. I mentioned before, my target markets, right? My target market is a really professional service space. We don't necessarily hang in professional services on Facebook. I wish everybody, I love a happy birthday, sometimes a day or two late. I get to see people I went to high school with, my college, friends are just, friend just turned 60. We're doing all this fun stuff, right? And I get to support my clients on Instagram and a variety of different things. My community is on LinkedIn. it was just, it wasn't where I have the biggest joy. It wasn't where I have the biggest, oh, this will be fun. You know, I took a walk last night and I did an Instagram story with a gorgeous sunset. Go check it out on Instagram, right? I talk about on LinkedIn, right? I did a video the other day and that was really, you know, about tangible business and people, we comment, we interact, we're relationship building there. So I was excited to see LinkedIn moving their needle forward because I know video is part of speaking that, right? So if we're looking at, I told you my forefront and my support mechanisms, my forefront is speaking. LinkedIn Lives are a form of speaking. My support is my social media and marketing here. LinkedIn. Oh, look, they go together. Check, check, win, win. It's time to step into that innovation moment.
I love that. I love that people and where to find your people are so built into this story, right? And then knowing exactly what your overall strategy is and seeing something new that pops up and saying, I see how this might fit in. Let's give it a shot. I love that. Thank you. I think that's such a good framework for our conversation today.
Yeah, thank you. And when listeners, when Julie and I prep for this stuff, we actually just sit and we have conversation because sometimes in our own businesses, it's hard for us to see because we're that close. So I didn't see the LinkedIn story. Julie coaxed it out of me. Listeners who are live today, I'd love you to pop into the chat. Where are you playing in innovation? How do you feel about taking some of the bold steps into innovation for yourselves?
And I want to say, as our attendees are commenting, one of the things with innovation, I said I think of it as a trapeze. Innovation is such a big, bold word, and it can be such a big, bold action. Doing a LinkedIn Live, that's something that's brand new. That's a pretty bold action. Innovation can also be something that's much simpler. It can be an innovation for your own practice or your own business that you know other people are doing. It's still new to you. Or it can be something that's sort of an incremental innovation. So when we're talking about this in bold action, I want to make sure that you're not thinking that you necessarily have to be, metaphorically, 20 feet up in the air, letting go of thing one and grabbing onto thing two. There's stages to this. And one example there that I think is a good one and a retrospective one. One of my clients recently, she's a sole practitioner. She's had an associate. It was clear for a variety of reasons that this associate was not going to be with her for the long term. And she has a tech-heavy practice that requires looking at some competing products and looking at them in a particular way, putting the information that she gathers in a particular way. And that's what her associate did for probably 60% of his time. She asked this person to do a step-by-step workflow. How is it you get this box? How do you start? How do you start documenting? What is it that you document? How do you do it? What's the context for it? Do you need to take pictures of the box, of the thing? What is it exactly? And had him create a workflow. It turned out she had planned to hire, the person she had planned to hire had to step out for some personal reasons.
Ouch.
This associate ended up resigning. My client can't possibly do that kind of work as well as the high level work that she was doing for her clients. Disaster, right? Except that she had innovated for her practice, having this workflow in place. So it can be that small, that obvious to a lot of us, and still be incredibly important. It's not a disaster because she can hand off the workflow and have somebody else do it.
It's, sometimes we forget to look at the little things. We're always looking for, the big pieces. And it's a great lesson when we hunker down and we look at the little things that help a business flow smoothly, effectively, profitably, everything that is working. And we're always, if we wait and we wait for those big boulders of innovation, okay, I'm going to build a whole new Amazon before we knew it was Amazon, potential, right? I'm going to build a new computer system before we knew it was a computer system like Apple. But if we look at all the little things in business, and we look at the little innovations, and then we also look at all the little things that go right, what do we actually achieve then?
One of my favorite books, business books, is Little Bets.
Oh.
And do you know that book, Ivy?
I don't know. I have a feeling I own it, and I recently found it when we're doing work in our basement because we had a flood, and I was cleaning things out, and I was like, and I found all these old boxes of books, and when you mentioned it, I was like, it's in those boxes, I bet.
Okay, well, definitely read it. It's an amazing book. And the principle of it is that even if you want to do the big innovation, the big big steps are composed of little steps. Yeah. And when you do take the little innovation and you see what happens, you see how it worked, you see the context for it, then it lets you take the next step without, what I love about your LinkedIn Live story, among other things, Ivy, is that you didn't brand everything out and present, here's the final product that we want to do to LinkedIn. You got approved first. That was your little bet, doing the application.
Right.
And then you took the next step. And that's an approach that lets us go a long way without either putting a lot of time, effort, and energy into things that may or may not work, but still move forward into something that can be very big once you put all the little pieces together.
And that's so true. I'm always telling people, I was like, oh, you want to go talk on this topic? Create an outline. You want to run a seminar on this topic? Create an outline. They're like, well, I have to build it out. They're like, no. You just need to create the outline. Then have somebody buy the outline, and then you're getting paid to build it out.
Exactly.
I like to get paid to build things out.
Well, and not only are you getting paid, but for the last time that I did that, I ran a program that was called the Rainmaker Blueprint Branding and Positioning Program. And I had in my head, I had an outline of what I wanted to present. As I got into it and I heard the questions of the participants, I realized, oh, I need to add this in. Oh, they're really not so interested in that, in my head, that was important. Let's take that out and put this in instead. So you can also adapt what you're doing while you're in the process, and you're getting, it's a trifecta win because it's a better product for the people that you're presenting to.
And Julie, one thing we were talking about before, we were talking about the importance, especially in measuring success. I'll get this out in English, ladies and gentlemen. You just wait and see. In measuring success, sometimes it takes a while, and sometimes it can be challenging. And I'm a big proponent of, we're going to be talking next month a little bit more about really knowing your numbers, your measurements, those more granular pieces. But in measuring success, people look for big wins. And it's all the little wins that add up. There's a great little tip, a little practice that I believe in. Every day, celebrate something that's worked. Acknowledge something every day. Just kind of bring back to a gratitude practice, which is a beautiful thing to do daily. in writing down, saying out loud and recording, whatever your practice is, whether you journal it or keep it in a gratitude app or whatever that is, looks like for you, is to acknowledge a success every day. Because what it does is it builds up your momentum to continue to take consistent action. Your best successes come from the results of consistency in your actions. Not how big your actions are or small your actions are, how consistent they are. So if we actually daily look at our baby wins and every day consistently celebrate a win, big, small, or indifferent, your consistency in taking the action will be that much greater.
And it's also supportive, because one of the examples that I think you mentioned, Ivy, is something to celebrate is I got to my desk, my day was planned out. Everything that I needed to start with project number 1 was exactly in place. And for me, I try to celebrate those things because I know the self tantrum that I throw when I get to my desk and I've not set myself up for success. Why on earth wouldn't I take a minute to say, wow, I am really glad that I put this together so that I can just jump into it and get started working. It locks in that, you know, I don't always love. I do a lot of my planning on Sunday evenings before the week starts. And then each day I plan in the evening for the next day. I don't love it. There's sometimes when I'm done with my day and I want to move on into whatever I'm doing that evening. When I have celebrated why it matters that I take that planning time, it makes it ever so much more likely that I will not only do it, but do it with some measure of grace and pleasure, knowing that I'm setting myself up. So those celebrations, you know, even seeing the little things that if we're not mindful about them, just go and see. I mean, of course it's all set. Of course it's all ready to go, but it's not an of course. You did it.
And with that, I love to add a routine at the end of the day. You know, I refer to it as my close of day routine. You know, back in the day when I was a printer for 20 some odd years, I had an end of day routine before I left the office to go home and play mommy. Right? And there was a transition there. There was a routine. There was a system. Okay. So as I'm talking about this, listen for the systems behind it. You know, I would review all the jobs of that day. I would make sure everything that got moved forward, right? Everything that needed to be touched got touched. Everything that needed to be moved forward got moved forward. Anything that needed to be followed up, that there was actions, maybe not me, maybe my team, took the actions on, right? My end of the day routine. We were set up to be prepped for the production meeting for the next morning. The next system was Ivy leaves the office. For Monday through Thursday, I used to work out either at 4:30 or 5. So I transitioned my mind and my patience level to go be present to play mom and be 100% present there. Okay, because if I walked in from the printing press to the problem right into mommyhood, we crashed, right? So there was that system put in place. What grounded Ivy, what brought me down, right? Created presence within me to go be presence for my next commitment and activity.
And Ivy, I'm just going to pause. Am I correct in guessing that that was an innovation when you discovered that without that time to ground yourself, hey, we have a problem, that it was an innovation for you to address that?
It started with, this can't work. There is no time for me. I can't exercise. There's no time. I'm a working woman. I'm running a business. I have young children. I need to be home when the babysitter leaves. And I came from a point of impossible to creating possibility, hence innovation. Then trepidation, can I do this? Is this going to work? What if I'm a few minutes late for a babysitter? What if I have to leave a few minutes early from work? What if there's a problem at work? Right? Is this going to work? There's a lot of trepidation there. And so we step in with the baby steps, and we tried one day and we tried 2 days. And when we had success there and routines and people got used to this and they knew my hours and they knew I left here and they knew I arrived here, we had commitment, which is that adaptation. So it's in all parts of our lives. It's not just business. It's our whole life that we're looking for innovation. In innovation, we have some trepidation at times, and then we adapt.
Exactly. Yes. And I think that trepidation, it's a step that I personally would prefer to skip. I don't enjoy those feelings. And yet I think that's the piece that says, hey, I've got some skin in this game. This matters. And again, that's something that makes me move forward with it because it matters. If it doesn't matter, if there's not at least a little bit of charge to it, why am I doing this? So I'm curious too, Ivy, let's talk, we've talked a little bit about success and how we determine success. What are the steps that you use to make a decision? Yes, this is worth continuing to innovate and move forward versus, that was a grand and glorious experiment and I'm done with that one.
Attendees, I just popped into the chat to please join in and please feel free to ask any questions. And where you have been or have been hesitant on your own innovation. Because trust me, I have been hesitant at times. I have been, what is this going to look like at times? Transferring complete careers. A little, when I can, and I'm going to detour here for a second. But when I came in and opened Slater Success in January of 2008, most people didn't really know what coaching was. I was leaving, moving out, not leaving, but moving from a business that was a large support of my family. I made a very, very good living. Our sales were in the 7 figures and then some. Into, what's a coach? Really?
Soccer or football?
Yeah.
I remember those days.
And so there's always been a lot of trepidation there when you're going to step into something new. And Julie and I both stepped into this part of our transition before people knew what this industry truly was. Correct, Julie?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. I was 05.
Oh, there you go. And so when we decided to talk about this, we weren't coming from a place of this is easy. We're coming from a place of this has value.
Oh, I love that distinction. Yes. Value's the driver.
Value's the driver. Value, having fun with it, excited about it, just like Julie pointed out earlier. And then the willing to, what I look at is, let's play in this space and see what happens.
Well, and I think it's interesting to note too, even when we play in a space and it doesn't work out. So let's take the example. I was reading an article about this recently, so it's been in my brain. Periscope. I don't know how many of you may remember Periscope. It was a service, I don't even know if it still exists, but it's certainly no longer in vogue. Periscope, Ivy, was that the Twitter one or the Facebook associated one? Doesn't even matter. It was one of them.
It was one of them.
And it was something where you would go on it and do a very, very short video. Maybe it was Twitter, because the emphasis was short and quick and get it out there and you're done. And there were people who just jumped into that, adapted to it, made it at the core of their business. And I think that what happened next is Facebook Live came to exist. And Periscope almost overnight, maybe it was 2 weeks, went away. And so for the people who had adapted to it, who had used it as a key part of their business, and then if you imagine the eyes of the world, The eyes of the world were on Periscope, and then the eyes of the world went over to Facebook Live, and it was just done. So what do you do? What do you do if you've made this innovation? You've gotten through it, you've adapted to it, you've committed to it, and then things change. Those skills are still transmissible in some way. That's one of the principles that I love about business. Nothing is ever wasted. So whether it is that you have great success and the system changes, or you do something, it is not a great success. Maybe you crash and burn. I've done that a few times. Maybe, Ivy, you never have, but I certainly have.
Throw me right in there with you.
There's always something to pick up and take on to the next thing.
And I mean, so now we have the onset of, I don't know how many people have been joined in on Clubhouse. Okay, so Clubhouse popped up. I'm going to say.
What is Clubhouse, Ivy?
I'm going to give dangerous information because I know enough to be dangerous. Okay. And so Clubhouse is a new platform. I believe it might have popped up this year, if not really at the end of last year. It's in beta testing right now, only usable on iPhones and iPads. Okay. And you have to be invited in. So you get a certain amount. Right? You have to be invited in. You get a certain amount of invitations. You use your invitations. You get to welcome people. And you can host rooms. So you could participate in a room that's being hosted, or you can host a room. So I probably have been an observer in Clubhouse for about 60 days now, give or take, maybe a little less. So I've popped into a few rooms and listened. I've noticed some of my colleagues and other professionals I know and admire and follow are starting to lead some rooms. Took notice, right? Made that mental note. Then popped in a couple of their rooms. And then when people said, oh, who has a question or who has a comment on on this? Or I got noticed because they know me, they invited me to speak. So now I referenced earlier, ladies and gentlemen, that tech is my trepidation. So I'm trying to unmute myself on a new platform that I just am trying to learn by popping in. And I can't unmute myself. And they're like, oh, Ivy, do you have a comment on here? It's so great to see you here. We're talking about networking. And Ivy always has a comment about networking if you listen to any of these webinars. And I'm like, sure I do, but I don't know how to say that. So trepidation, I am working through this. I text this person directly, trying to figure out how to unmute. They text back. I unmute. I join in. So what's my next action? I said, well, I've observed, I'm learning, I have not mastered. Got it? I am not at mastery level. I'm not close to mastery level. I'm at the level of know enough to be dangerous. And I own it. I said, well, I should host a room. But one thing I learned years ago is I don't have to be at mastery if I could find somebody who's that one step ahead of me. Not 5 and not 10, just 1. So I went back to some of those people that I know on LinkedIn, and I saw, who do I know on LinkedIn that I have good associations with and relationships with, network, going back to previous webinars.
Yes.
And I did and I saw who is being really active in a leadership role on Clubhouse. Now they couldn't know all that much. They're only one step ahead. It's only been here for barely 90 days, right? It could be Periscope tomorrow. We don't know. But I popped in and I'm listening to something else. I'm like walking with Barbara Corcoran and somebody talking about waitressing and business development. I was like, I relate to this. I've waitressed and I actually see the relationship. And if Barbara Corcoran's dropping in, maybe I should actually find a leadership role here. So I went back, created a network on my network, and I'm hosting my first live room in the next couple of weeks. How much do I know? Enough to be dangerous. I found somebody who's innovation, but I'm going to step into the innovation of Clubhouse. I don't know if it's long lasting. It's not my innovation. It's somebody else's innovation, but it could have really good staying power. And if it has staying power, I want to play there. Do I have a lot of trepidation about it? Of course I do. I couldn't unmute myself. Live and learn, right? Am I going to commit to it? Am I going to see success in it? I'll let you know. Stay tuned. But we're going to evaluate it as we go along. And I'm going to be open to playing. I'm going to be open to failing. I'm going to be open to messing up. Because one of the biggest things about being innovative and playing with innovation is knowing that you have a 50 or more % chance to falling flat on your butt. But what you learn in that process could be your next massive breakthrough.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm going to say one more thing about Clubhouse, because we get a strong legal community here. People are recording things unannounced. Be aware, attorneys of the world, and playing with Clubhouse. Read your articles. Go in with your eyes open. Go in with your eyes open. People are recording unnotified.
Boy, that's an important tip.
Right? Because when I started playing with it, I had my team. I said, "What do you guys know about Clubhouse?" I got a lot of nothings. I said, "Who wants to do some research?" Somebody said, "Yeah, I'm curious about this. I'll do some research." I said, "Do some research, see what you could find." We started pulling up some articles, some great articles, and then some articles that in the professional service space really we need to know about.
And I love that, I'm all for getting that curiosity and that sense of, oh, I want to play, and jumping in with both feet. I love that one of the threads that runs through this, Ivy, is observation. What exactly is this? Because again, if you're doing something for your business, which is the reason we're here, you want to be sure that you're in a pool where the kinds of people you want to reach are also playing. And so, for instance, for me, I'm like you, Ivy. I am personally involved for Facebook, ditto on Instagram. I work exclusively with lawyers. I don't market there, not because lawyers are not in those places, but because they're not in their business mindsets in those places. They too are on Facebook to celebrate their friends' birthdays and to go to the cool Zoom on how to plant for pollinators. I do my business on LinkedIn. For Clubhouse, are the right people there for whatever, the thing that I love is that I promise if somebody watches this video a year from now, they'll be saying some version of, I can't believe that fill in cool techno name for some new platform wasn't even discussed, because it doesn't exist. We don't know what it is. It's always going to be changing, but there are some things that you can look at, no matter what the platform may be, no matter what, the subject of innovation in whatever manner it may pop up. There's some things that you can look at to evaluate. Do I want to step in here? If I do, how much? And how am I going to judge whether this thing is successful? So Ivy, I think I led us away from a question. I think I asked a question and then led us away from it.
No, I actually think led away from it. I'll probably own that.
Well, somebody did.
One of us did.
How do you measure success? What do you look at? So for instance, as you're looking at your LinkedIn Live, how do you measure success there?
So for the LinkedIn Lives, it's interesting. I'm not measuring success on how many people are showing up live, although please show up live, okay? I'm measuring success of people reaching out to me that are my ideal world.
So point, if I may, branding, lots and lots of eyes, people being aware of who you are and what you do versus actual business development. Maybe there are 5 people watching. If 3 of them reach out to you, that is amazing success.
Correct. And the show we did that had Jennifer Mills interviewed from ESPN, that was all about mentorship of women. Mm-hmm. Somebody posted as we were live, like, I was just scrolling, I saw this conversation and wanted to join in. Mm-hmm. That might seem like one person and that's a baby. To me, that was the shark, because it was somebody who didn't consciously see myself or Jennifer's name and want to join in. They came for, this is interesting to me, I want to join. To me, that measure of success was massive because it meant what we're talking about has interest to people who don't know us yet. So it gives us the ability to expand our networks. Other ways I measure success is I want to look at, I like my numbers. I always say, numbers tell us a story. Open the book. There's a lot of different chapters, and numbers are not just your finances. Numbers are your team. Numbers are your marketing. Numbers are your sales. And in that, when I look with my clients in their businesses of the stories of the numbers in their business. We're recently looking a lot at, last year was either clients who had great growth, clients that maintained and did maintain the status quo, which was a great accomplishment last year in so many ways. People were in survival mode for their businesses in so many ways. So we're going back now in the first quarter and looking at profitability. What are we seeing? It's right. Where are we seeing opportunity? Where could we be innovative with this opportunity? Then we can continue, right? So in this piece, and Julie, we're going to be talking more about that soon, aren't we?
We are indeed. Should I go ahead and spill the beans, Ivy?
I think it's time.
Okay. So we hope you will join us for our next webinar on April 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Let's see if I can do this. 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, noon Mountain at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Elsewhere in the world, check worldclock.com. Our webinar is going to be Ivy's phrase, numbers tell a story. And we're going to look at that in 3 ways. We're going to look back. April 20th, we will have just completed our taxes. What did last year really look like? Now that we have a little bit of time to take a look at it, put it in context, what did it look like? What does it tell? What story does it tell us? Look forward. How are we going to adjust our objectives based on what we've discovered from last year, where we are? Here we are on March 11th today? Yes.
Correct.
The world is going to look different almost certainly by the time we get to April 20th. So what are we going to be dealing with at that point, and how are we going to adjust to that? How are we going to adjust our objectives in light of what is then? And then live now, take action. So Ivy and I have been doing these webinars for, I guess, a little over 6 months now.
Around there.
And we're delighted that some of you have been joining us live throughout or watching the recordings throughout. We hope you have some notes. One of the things we always ask, and we're going to be asking soon, so start thinking about this, you all. What is it that you're going to take away from this conversation? What are you going to do as a result of it? So live now. What action are you going to take in order to reach these objectives that you're setting for 2021? So April 20th, please join us.
Mark your calendars. And if anybody wants to either come on live or put in the chat, what have you taken away from the conversation today on innovation, trepidation, adaptation? And what's the action item you're going to move forward on?
Action is where it's at, right? Conversation is good, but action is what actually makes things change. So yes, I would love to see. And if you don't care to join in the chat, if you don't want to put it there, that's fine too. Please be sure that you actually write down, here's what I'm going to do. That's what makes it happen. So Ivy, one thing as we're waiting for comments, something that I wanted to ask you about, we've talked about how you measure success. It is somewhat obvious if you see a lot of success, okay, it's time to commit. What else goes into making the decision to commit to an innovation?
I'm a person who has a creative soul, so I can have a lot of ideas. Okay.
Yes.
And if you did my an assessment called Colby, I would be defined as a quick start. Somebody was like, oh, this sounds great, let's do this. Oh, this sounds great, let's do this, okay? So what I do is I do have a lot of ideas. I know who I am, I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses. First thing I do is I run it by my trusted advisor group.
Love that. Your
Okay.
network. We always come back to network, Ivy. Always.
Somehow we do. I run it by my trusted, my team members, some other coaches and consultants that's in my trusted advisor group, some other colleagues I truly respect. And I'll say, hey, I have this thought, I have this idea, and we do a brainstorm. I do a brainstorm around it. And then we will create, if it has value, we'll create 1, 2, and 3 action steps to take. We do not create a year-long plan around it. We're going to test it. And then based on those 1, 2, 3 steps, we're going to have another evaluation. What we see, right? And now we are committed to LinkedIn Lives.
Yes.
I did the same thing when I started speaking. I didn't see myself as a speaker.
Really? Okay, that legitimately shocks me.
I danced as a kid. I was on many, many stages, but I did not speak on stage, ever. Even when I was invited to a role, it was not. And so I did not see myself as a speaker. And I was encouraged. And I said, okay, I could try this on a small level. And so I spoke at 5 minutes somewhere. It's like, okay, I survived that. And then we measure the results of that. How many conversations do people want to have with me after I spoke for that 5 minutes? Right? So he said, okay, what if I did for 10? I've spoken at full day conferences all day long now. I've spoken for hour keynotes in front of hundreds of people. But I started with something that I wasn't sure about. I took the baby step, evaluated it, took the next one. What about you, Julie?
For me, it's very similar. It is testing. It's always about the testing. And it's about, I make sure that I actually keep records, because for me, I love the word metrics. In addition to being a lawyer, I did patent litigation. I have a science background. I love data. I love data. And so I will have a document that says, here's what I did, here are the dates, here's what happened. And over time, I will go back to that document and look at it and see not just the individual entries, but the trend. And I will look at whatever it is in the bigger picture of my business, of whatever else I have going on, because let's face it, there's sometimes when, I don't have as much going on. And so the bar may be lower for committing to an activity. At other times, I've just recently wrapped up a year chairing a section within the American Bar Association. Yeah. I did not take on anything extra during that year. Chairing and being in a pandemic was about all I could handle. So looking in the context and then putting all of these things together, and also bringing in, did I actually enjoy that? Is that something that I want to continue? Because I will tell you, there are some activities that I did at different points in my business. Going to conferences as an attendee is one of them. In the before times when we could do that, I traveled quite a bit and I went to conferences. I met people, I developed my network from that perspective. It was fantastic. And then one day I woke up, this is not a lie, y'all. I woke up, I looked around, I thought, where am I? And why is the housekeeping so lousy? And I realized that I was at home and I thought, yeah, no, something has to change. And so the attending conferences, now I'll do 1 or 2, or I guess someday again, I will do 1 or 2. But the context changed. I wasn't enjoying it. And so I decided, let's find a way to get the same good results that I got with that in some other way. So there is both the metrics and the, what I'll call gut feel that go together for me when I'm deciding, is this something that I want to commit to? Because once I've committed, you know, it's going to go on for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Things can change, but a commitment is real.
Love that.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take this moment, write down your takeaways of joining in today and the actions you're going to commit to. Mark your calendars for April 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern. I'm not as nice as Julie. 11 Pacific and go to world clock in between.
I live in Cheyenne, Wyoming, Ivy. Mountain time matters.
12 Mountain, one Central, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, thank you for joining us today. You know, we appreciate everybody who takes this amount of time out of their calendar, or as you've multitasked, which is fine, as long as you're actually listening and applying the learning lessons.
Yes.
Continue to move forward. You know, just a little cheers for International Women's Day this week. And Julie, to a fellow woman leader, somebody I greatly admire, respect, and value having this play space with.
Thank you, Ivy. Cheers. I feel the same. Thank you for being here, everyone. We'll look forward to seeing you next month. Your numbers matter. Join us.